never have known if you hadn't met them in person.
Yeah. And then last thing on the content creation side, like because we're talking about community and collaboration and all that, like when you do have a moment where your video goes viral and it goes in, because you know how it works, it goes into a different audience. Like, how do you kind of handle like reaching new audience that don't know your content? They just kind of start attacking. Like, how do you kind of handle some of that part of being a content creator?
For sure. I think it's definitely helpful to reply to one of those comments. That's what I usually do. I just hit the reply button. We'll just talk to the camera and say, hey, I saw this comment and here's what I think about this. Like, I've definitely gotten the comment that's like, oh, why do I need to diversify my bookshelf if, these are the books I'm being recommended? And I'll probably tell them the same thing I told you earlier. That's like, well, sometimes you might be fed the same content again and again, but you need to go outside of that and try to look for diverse book recommendations. Otherwise, the industry is always going to say the same. So you can't say why are there not more, books by XYZ demographic being published while also not making an effort yourself, right? Because the publishers are going to meet the demands of what the consumer demands, right? So if the consumer doesn't demand better from the publishing industry, it's just not going to change. And you can't put that on the publishing industry that they're not changing. Because at the end of the day, it's a business and they're going to do whatever the consumers want, right? So that's like the most basic way that I can explain to people. And most people, like, I think 90% of people are like, oh, yeah, that's fair. That makes sense. And if they're new, like, that's such a simple way to break it down that can be applied to anything. It's not just about books, that can apply to any industry. Why are people not buying blue water bottles? Oh, there's not demand for blue water bottles. You can go ahead and apply that to literally anything. It doesn't have to be about books specifically. So I think something like that is helpful for a new audience. It also brings people in. Like, I don't think it's helpful to reply to a comment and start yelling at somebody and being like, you just don't know, blah, blah, what's going on about this. And you need to do this and read that. And you shouldn't read, things from this person because they're problematic. I just don't think that's helpful discourse. And like that, I just don't think that's a great way of bringing people in. And I think Book Talk should be a place where we want people to learn and we want to bring more people and get more people into reading. Even if they might not be reading what we think is the right book. So they might be reading problematic books. Like a lot of people just don't know. And so just being like, hey, you should go ahead and Google this thing about this person. And then if you like this type of fantasy book, read this type of fantasy book that's very, very similar, but the author hasn't said all these harmful things about this group of people.
I think that makes a lot of sense. You kind of stitch it, you make a video, you kind of educate from what the response they say, and then it gives your audience, who's like your core members who understand what you're saying, a deeper understanding of how you see the world. The new people that come in, they say, okay, I might have misinterpreted how she said this thing or thought about that. I became a fan of her because the way she had the tact, or lack of a better word, for addressing what I had to say. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of content creators can relate to that.
I hope so. Yeah, I think definitely a lot of people have faced the same type of comments over and over about, XYZ. And so I do think at some point it's like, okay, you get tired of explaining. It's like, okay, go see the video I made last week when you commented the same thing. But even if it's not the person who commented who understands what it is, I think a lot of the people who watch it, who are new viewers, might understand that too. And they might say, okay, that I won't comment this again on the same video.
If you enjoyed that clip, make sure you head over to www.bookupapp.com to download our app so you can connect with your favorite bookish content creators, start conversations, and start your own book club.